You know that idea, you are your thoughts? And a lot of times we think about ourselves as, oh yeah, my experience is what my thoughts are. We need to be very clear about thoughts, about how we think about thoughts, which is a little bit odd, but stay with me on this. The thoughts that come to us are not who we are. We need to be very clear about that. Thoughts are coming to us all the time. They're all like suggestions, ideas, things that are, well, I'm going to say suggestions, like the mortal thoughts. That's not who we are. So when we are divesting ourselves of the suggestions, we're not getting rid of ourselves. Like I think there's this the ego, that false ego, would like us to start thinking that we are our thoughts, and that as we think, there are all these expressions, and a lot of them have truth in them, but they can get us turned around. As a man thinketh, so is he. Well, yeah, that's true. But are we our thoughts? Is that who we are? Is that who God made us to be? We have to be very clear that our identity, the very nature of our being, is the reflection of soul. It's God expressed. Well, is God expressed all of those thoughts? No. Good thoughts, the impervious armor, that's all good. But who we are it's kind of like it's behind all the thoughts, all the thinking. You hear this a lot when you sort of are in meditation circles, and you hear people talking about meditation and what happens when you meditate, what happens when you sort of find that center of your soul, those kinds of conversations that don't tend to be sort of religious conversations. It needs to be more around sort of spirituality. But there's wisdom in the understanding that we are, in those circles, you would call it the observer. The one who is observing all the thoughts coming and going is much closer to who you are than all the thoughts coming and going. I don't know if that helps sort of make the distinction for you. Thoughts are going to be coming and going, suggestions. It's a constant thing. When you're trying to be silent and still and have a moment of peace, that there's this just constant chatter going on. Well, the constant chatter, that false ego's chatter, is not you. That's not who you are. Who you are is the divine manifestation of God. And in that, think of the definition of God. Think of how you would define God, or a definition that you know well, that you feel comfortable with. And if you don't use the word God, that's okay. Use source or universe, whatever it is for you, that is that higher power, the creator of all. When you identify the creator, what qualities do you ascribe to it? To him, her. What qualities are the qualities of God? You, as the reflection of those qualities, is who you are. That's your beingness. The thoughts, not who you are. So when we make all of this effort to sort of cast out the false suggestions, the false beliefs, just know you're not casting yourself off. It's the beliefs, it's the erroneous thoughts, it's the suggestions that are being dispensed with. Now, here's an interesting thing. The more you get into that place of, this is who I am, kind of sitting back in that, if you want to call it the observer, the one who knows. God is the all-knowing, right? You're sitting back into, I am at one with the all-knowing mind. When you sit in that place, you can see all the thoughts going by like clouds in the sky. And you can feel it's not me, it's okay. I can observe these, they're coming and going. I can let them just be. I don't have to react to them, because it is that false sense of ego that would grab hold of them and start reacting when stuff hooks you, right? It's not hooking you, it's hooking the story of you, the egoic image of you. It's not hooking you. You, the true you, can't be hooked. So when you feel that sense of being hooked, it's a really clear indication that that ego, that false ego, has taken on something, and personal sense has made it yours, has claimed it as you. Because then you have to defend it. Then you have to right the wrong. Then you have to, blah, 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 blah. Then you have to go into the big battle. But if you sit back in who you are as God's reflection, none of that phases you. And you'll see, and that's where that level of peace, right? The Bible says, in the multitude of my thoughts within me, thy comforts delight my soul. So in the multitude of thoughts, all the thoughts, where does peace sit? Behind the thoughts or above the thoughts, however you want it, whatever image you want helps you sort of take this in. I'm sitting in a peaceful place. Thy comforts delight my soul. What is true about me, the true me, is what brings me peace, is what delights my soul, is that thing in me that can stay at peace when the ego gets hooked, when the thoughts chatter and a battle is raging. I can sit in that place of peace and say, that's not me. That's a thought that's trying to attach itself as a personal part of me, personal sense, false ego. Recognize the distinction. So when you identify, yes, your thought becomes your experience, your thought, the true thought of you, it becomes whatever you buy into, right? So you get to choose which one of those versions is going to be your experience. Is it going to be the ego's thinking? Is that going to be your experience? Because your thought does become your experience, but you get to choose which of those is going to be true for you. So there's always that moment when the thoughts come running by. If the ego gets hooked and the ego takes it on personally as who you are, you identify with those thoughts as who you are, yeah, you get that experience, good or bad, good, bad, ugly, sickness, sin, death, all of that stuff. The belief that that's who you are is the thing that hooks you into that erroneous experience, because the experience follows the belief, but you have the choice to not believe that as who you are. You have the choice to understand who you are is the reflection of the divine. It has nothing to do with all those thoughts. So your thought of yourself, of your true self, can also be your experience. And what does that look like? That looks like you sitting in peace when all the raging is going on outside of you, trying to hook the ego. And you can say, I know that's not me. I know that's not mine. I know that's not my experience, because that's not who I am. And that's that moment of choice. That's that moment of decision. You know, this choice matters. That's the place where it happens. Do you take it on personally? Does your ego feel like who you are? Now, be very careful, because some of us in the world have curated incredibly wonderful, good egos that are successful and have all the titles and all the salaries and all the stuff. And people have curated these egos into just precision and perfection. And then when something goes wrong and they have to let go of that perfect little picture of themselves, all heck breaks loose. And it feels like loss, and it feels like chaos, and it feels like out of controlness and overwhelm and stress, because that's the ego trying to hold on to a perfect little picture of an ego. Letting that go, allowing that to release from your thought to the ego feels really scary. But if you know that that's not who you are, oh my gosh, it's a relief to let go of all of that struggle to be a perfection, little perfect picture. What a relief to let go of that. There's a wonderful quote in this book I quote all the time, Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy, where she gives a little window into what that release looks like. She talks about Christians. Well, when I use the term Christian Science, just know that that relates to all the laws of God, the laws of good, these spiritual laws that exist, are in effect, and apply to everybody. So it's not a religious thing, though people know Christian Science as a religion. Just know that Christian Science is relating to these laws of good, right? That exist, that anyone can live by. It's not necessarily the term for a religion. Christian Science, this process by which we are doing this, right, silences human will. Plug in ego right there. Silences ego. Silences human will, quiets fear with truth and love, and those two are capitalized, meaning synonyms of God. Quiets fear with truth and love. Well, what fear would that be? The fear that the ego is me. Oh, I don't want to let that go, right? Quiets fear with truth and love, the truth of your being, the love that God has for you just as you are, as he created you to be. Quiets fear with truth and love, like allows the release, right? And illustrates the unlabored motion of the divine energy in healing the sick. The unlabored motion of the divine energy in healing the sick, in healing you from the belief that the ego is who you are, healing the belief that you have to be perfect, and if your perfect ego isn't out there in the world, no one will love you. The healing that if you don't make a certain amount of money, you'll never have abundance in your life. The belief that, the healing of all those beliefs. The unlabored motion of the divine energy in healing all of those false beliefs. Christian Science silences human will. That human tendency to grab onto the egoic concept of yourself and call it you. That's the thing that we get to sit into, that place in consciousness that is all love, all truth, God expressed, the knowingness of our being. Sit in that place. And what's really interesting, the unlabored motion of the divine energy, it's kind of like when you get a thorn, right? When you get a thorn, it works its way out. You don't have to do anything when you get a splinter. It works its way out. Well, the same is true for all the false beliefs. They naturally get worked out of your consciousness. Divine consciousness can't abide false belief. So all of those beliefs that come up about who you are, and you, the ego trying to curate all of that, all of those beliefs naturally get pushed out of your thought as who you are. Naturally. It's not a struggle that you need to go do battle with. That sense that it's got to be this big struggle is the false ego talking. That's personal sense talking. That's not divine mind talking. Divine mind, God, the all-intelligent, all-knowing mind, doesn't deal in false belief. Doesn't know anything about false belief. It's the all-knowing, all-intelligent, all-loving, all-truth mind. No false belief in there. It's truth. It's not false. There's no lie in there. It's only that false sense of ego, that false sense of ego, because the true ego is God, the false sense of ego, which is all wrapped up in personal sense, that would think, I gotta struggle, I gotta fight, I gotta battle. False ego. So that divine, the unlabored motion of the divine energy of spirit, that divine energy is that welling up of the divine nature, the awareness of your divine nature, pushes out all the false beliefs just by virtue of being. So there's no struggle there. So what a relief. What a relief. I think of, let me just look at one thing here. I'm going long. That's all right. It's Friday. I'm going long. I'm going long, people. I think of an experience that I had, and this seems like it doesn't relate, but it actually does. When I first got out of college and I was living at home south of Boston, about an hour, long commute back, and I had to get up really early, commuting into working at the Christian Science Center where I work at the Christian Science Monitor. And I thought, I'd really love to get an apartment in Boston. Well, long story short, I prayed about it because that's just what I did from very little wee me all the way on. I just prayed about stuff. It's like, okay, God, you want me to be, where do you want me to be? You know, what would you have me do? Where would you have me be? Like, make it clear. And out of the blue, and I honestly just let it go. I just put it in God's hands and I let it go. And I didn't do a lot of research. I kind of made a few questions out there and sort of looked around, but I thought it'll work out. I'm not going to stress over it. When it would come up in conversation, I'd let people know I was looking for an apartment. I got a call out of the blue, and it was someone I'd known from a youth group I'd been involved in, but I hadn't talked to in years. And they had kind of heard through the grapevine that I was looking for a place. And turns out she was looking for a roommate, and she called me. Well, this apartment, like, Boston rents were pretty high. I was, a new little, just out of college, not making a lot of money. And for me to live in the city was a bit of a stretch. This apartment was so inexpensive. It was almost like, wait, what? Really? It was like a couple of $100 a month. And though this was back in the 80s, rents then were $600-700 a month. It was still pretty high. So this was a lot less than it would normally be. Sight unseen, I knew it was right. I said, absolutely, I'll be your roommate. Moved in, had an apartment. What's really interesting, because that was my first experience of really sort of being on my own and finding an apartment and finding housing, that place in me that didn't feel lack, that place in me that did feel cared for, loved, guided, was kind of my GPS at the moment. Like, that was the GPS that was driving me. My ego was not driving me. That false ego was not, oh my gosh, this is going to be hard. This is going to be a struggle. I'm going to have to go like pound the pavement and look at every apartment and find the best deal. And none of that egoic thinking was going on, either because I was just too innocent and didn't have a clue, probably, or because I actually did have a clue. I was really just trusting God. Notice how that innocence of trust kept me out of the ego's view of what that should look like. The ego thinks it has to be hard, thinks it has to be a struggle, thinks it has to be a big search and all this. And that's not to say make the effort. I did. As I was prompted, I made the effort, whatever. I took the steps that I needed to take. I'm not suggesting sit back and do nothing. Listen to the abundant nature of God and act out from that place of thought, as opposed to listen to the ego's version and act out from that place of thought. Because yes, our thought does become our experience, but we get to choose which basis of thought are we taking on. So had that apartment for years and then was able to basically gift it to, as you know, rents went up and up and up, gifted it to a dear friend of mine who was diving into his passion for life, which was music, was going to Berklee School of Music, and what didn't, you know, had a part-time job, but didn't have a lot of money. And because I loved his music, loved him as a friend, I thought, this is a really cool gift I can give. Now, what would the ego have done in that circumstance? Oh, I can sublet it and make some money. Let me sublet it. I'm paying like $215 a month. I can sublet this for $800. That's what the ego's version of that would have been. It's very natural for me to just say, this is a great deal. This is yours. This is not mine now. I've moved on. I'm doing something else. Here you go. So when we operate from the place of divinity, God, source, abundance, balance, alignment, love, truth, all that God is, when we operate from that place in our thought, our experience is peaceful, harmonious, less hooked. We get less hooked by things. And that becomes how life is run. That's how our life starts being expressed. Less and less and less you get hooked by things. You recognize that, oh, yeah, that false sense of ego is getting hooked again. Personal sense, don't need to go there. The unlabored motion of the divine energy in healing the sick, in healing the sick thoughts of the ego, right? That's a wonderful way to approach life. Let's bring it in for a little bit of silence and then we will come back. Let's bring it in. So I encourage you to make that choice, to like notice your thoughts and make the choice. Where are you going to sit in your thinking as your place of operation? Are you sitting in the divine mind as the source of your being? Or are you sitting in the human false ego personality with all of those thoughts as the source of your being? That's the choice that you get to make, and you get to make that choice. So one brings you a lot of struggle and control, and most of us are very familiar with it because we have done it a lot. Or a place of real peace and harmony. And that doesn't mean you're not going to be challenged. Don't get me wrong. You will be challenged, but you will recognize that the challenges are not a challenge to who you are. They're just a challenge to how you are going to approach these thoughts coming up. Are you going to take them on personally, or are you going to let the divine reveal what is true? So those of you visiting, welcome. So nice to have you here. Those of you who are my regulars, you are on, if you've chosen to be, you're on an invoice, and you'll get your invoice probably today or tomorrow. then you can just pay for November that way. Those of you who are interested in joining us, go to lisataylorcs.com, lisataylorcs.com, and just sign up, but definitely use the newcomer special when you sign up for Morning Metaphys, because that's what we are. So thank you all for coming. I am going to actually pause the recording and then start it up again.